The trip to India itself took place March 1st. I left, and I think March 3rd I arrived. It was 24 hours of flight over to New Delhi, and I spent a couple days recovering from that flight, and then took a 6.5-hour drive to Rishikesh. Now this is all in the north part of India, and just at the bottom, Rishikesh is at the bottom of the Himalayan mountains. When you get to Delhi, it's a place of great poverty and pollution, and I cannot on one trip to India give you any kind of authoritative travelogue or commentary on what was going on. In fact, I mean, that was one of the questions I asked myself, is what is going on in this place that I was seeing so much poverty. And I think that that would probably take a lifetime of study. That poverty continued all the way up into the Himalayas, but by the time I got to the ashram that I was studying at, it was a little more rural and a little more green, at least. But I mean, certainly around you everywhere were two things I could say about the people. One is they really seemed to not be well off, but secondly, very devout in their Hindu tradition. And I'll say more on that later as well. I stayed at what's called Swami Rama Sadhakagrama, and that simply means it's an ashram or a retreat center for sadhakas, for students of spirituality, of the spiritual life. And this is a place that contains not just facilities for short-term students like myself. I was only there 2 weeks, for 2 weeks of programming, but also for people who live there 1 to 10 years and spend a great part of their life training to go out and be swamis or teachers of other types. And so we got to mingle with those people as well. So after a 6.5-hour cab ride to Rishikesh, we pulled up. I was about 11 o'clock at night, and we pulled up to the gates, and armed guards let us in, and I was led down to a cottage. I had my own cottage. This is a really nice place, actually, and I say really nice and do this. Because it's beautiful facilities, but one thing about ahimsa is that you don't kill any living beings, and so you share your cottage with whatever living beings have chosen to be in there. And so I had a lot of ants. I had a gecko that kept visiting me, and you just had to love them and appreciate them and welcome them and befriend them. So, but the lodging was really nice. We stayed in cottages that we never saw because at 4:15 in the morning, the alarm clock would go off. If you wanted a shower, you had to start the hot water a half hour before you could use it. But by 4:15, all through the mountains, again, we're sitting at the foot of the Himalayan mountains. All through the mountains are similar ashrams, but different kinds of ashrams. And there's a type of yoga called bhakti yoga, people who focus strictly on the devotional characteristic of worshiping God. And so they would get up and music would be booming at 4 in the morning, and they'd be up and singing, and you could hear this from miles and miles away. And they consider that hour between 3 and 5 as a very auspicious time to be up and worshiping. So we would shower and get right off to a period of prayer, And that started at 5, and then 5:15 they would put us through an hour and a half of yoga asanas, or the poses, or what you'd see in an exercise studio. And then we'd be moved into breathing exercises. There are various kinds of breathing exercises that we practice, and then we'd be dismissed to breakfast. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner was potatoes, vegetables, rice, and bread. It was really good the first day or two. 2 weeks of it was a bit much, but it was a lot of food, and it was meant to fill you up so you didn't need anything to eat during the day, so that you could literally sit. We sat on the ground for our classes throughout the whole day. So there was a sign on the wall that said, "Eat mindfully," but your time was so short that mindfully for me meant, yes, I recognize I'm eating, but if I hurry up and eat, I can go back and wash my clothes, or I can go back and Skype home, or I can whatever I needed to do before the classes started. And at 8 o'clock, the classes would start and go until 1. And we'd literally just sit in a place on a floor and listen and participate. The classes that we had were psychology. Again, the Yoga Sutras come to us from a pre-rational time, but their notion of the mind is an interesting one, and one that I think is really more intuitive to us today, even as we understand psychology more. And it's just this idea that there is, behind all the personality that we pile on ourselves every day, all the roles that we play, all the grudges that we have, all the love that we feel, there is the true self, the part that watches all this going on. And so that part of us that gets assembled in the morning when we wake up, when we first wake up, and we, oh yeah, that's right, I work at Starbucks, and I'm married to so-and-so, and I don't like cauliflower and whatever else, and I have these worries and these hatreds. That part is a part of our mind that's shaped by things we experience every day, and that we unconsciously put into a storehouse in our mind. And is it science? I wouldn't call it science in the sense that you could do any experiments and say, yeah, this is what the mind is like, but it certainly does relate to modern understandings of how the mind functions.